What if the story isn't over? What if the cracks beneath Hawkins aren't just pathways to another dimension, but to a dozen different terrifying possibilities, each one darker than the last? We're about to explore the roads not taken, the secrets still buried, and the chilling what-ifs that twist the story of Stranger Things into something new, something wrong. Quick question before we get started. What's the one detail from the show you just can't stop thinking about? Let us know below. Now let's turn off the lights and descend into the shadows of what might have been. What if the Upside Down wasn't a place that was discovered? What if it was a place that was made? For years, we've assumed it was an ancient, parallel dimension, a primordial evil that had always been there, just waiting for a psychic little girl to accidentally punch a hole in reality. But the clues in Season 4 paint a much more personal and far more terrifying picture. It suggests the Upside Down isn't a Dimension 11 found, but a prison she created, a kingdom she unknowingly built for its first and only king, Henry Creel, Vecna. Let's not just consider this theory, let's live in it for a while and see how it changes everything we thought we knew about the shadow beneath Hawkins. The implications are staggering, suggesting that the entire conflict from the very first Demogorgon to the final war is not just a battle for a small town in Indiana, but a deeply personal vendetta between two superpowered children, a creator and her monstrous creation. Here's where it gets really weird. The single most compelling piece of evidence for this entire theory comes from Nancy Wheeler. When she gets pulled into the Upside Down in Season 4, she escapes to her room, looking for the guns she stored there. But they're gone. Everything in her room is just as she left it in 1983. Her diary is open to a page from November 6, 1983. The wallpaper is the old, childish pattern. The posters on the wall, the notes on her desk, it's all a perfect, dusty snapshot of the day Will Byers disappeared. This isn't just a random detail, it's the linchpin. Why would an ancient parallel dimension be frozen in time on that specific day? It makes no sense, unless that's the day the dimension as we know it was truly born. Think about it. Henry Creel is banished by 11 in 1979. He's sent tumbling through some kind of chaotic, primordial space. We see him get struck by lightning, his body twisting and burning, transforming into the creature we know as Vecna. He describes it himself. He says he became an explorer in a realm unspoiled by mankind. This implies a raw, unformed reality. Not a mirror of Hawkins, not yet. He was in the clay, but he hadn't sculpted it. So what happened between 1979 and 1983? For 4 years, Vecna was likely just existing, adapting, learning the rules of his new prison. But he was powerless to reach back across the void. He needed a bridge. He needed a connection. And on November the 6th, 1983, he got one. 11 in the sensory deprivation tank at Hawkins' lab makes contact with a Demogorgon. In her fear and panic, she opens the first stable, albeit temporary, gate. That contact, that first psychic bridge between worlds since she banished Henry, was the moment Vecna had been waiting for. It was the influx of energy, the psychic blueprint he needed. Using the connection 11 provided, he essentially took a snapshot of Hawkins on that exact day and imprinted it onto the raw, chaotic dimension he inhabited. He molded the formless world around him into a dark reflection of the town he despised, creating the perfect hunting ground. The Upside Down isn't a parallel Hawkins, it's a photograph of Hawkins, developed in a dark room of pure evil. This explains why there are no people. It explains the decay. It's a memory, fading and rotting over time. It explains the specific date. It wasn't the day the Upside Down was created from nothing, but the day it was shaped by Vecna using 11's psychic energy as his tool. He turned his prison into his palace, a perfect, rotting monument to the day his war on Hawkins truly began. The evidence is more than just circumstantial. It's baked into the very fabric of the show's world-building, a chilling revelation hiding in plain sight. Let's not forget Vecna's own words. He never says he found a world that looked like Hawkins. He tells Eleven he saw a means to realize his potential. He didn't just want to escape, he wanted to remake the world in his own image, a world free of the uniquely human pestilence. What better way to start than by creating a practice version? A dark mirror where he could hone his skills, marshal his forces, and prepare his invasion. The Upside Down is his workshop. The Demogorgons, the Demodogs, the Mind Flayer itself, they might not be native species of this dimension. They could be things he found there, raw life forms of the primordial chaos that he then twisted and weaponized, just like he twisted the landscape itself. He is the ultimate puppet master, and the Upside Down is his very own handcrafted stage. The level of detail in Nancy's room is too specific to be a coincidence. The test papers, the diary, the decor, these are personal, intimate details. For the dimension to have replicated them so perfectly, it would require a deep, invasive psychic scan of the town. A scan that would only be possible at a moment of intense psychic connection, the very connection Eleven made on November 6th, 1983. She thought she was just touching a monster. She was actually giving her oldest enemy the keys to the kingdom. The corroborating evidence goes beyond just Nancy's diary. It's woven into the very design of the Upside Down's primary antagonist, the Mind Flayer. Let's rewind to Henry Creel's childhood. He was a lonely, disturbed boy obsessed with black widow spiders. He found them to be profound, misunderstood creatures, essential predators that brought order to a broken ecosystem. He saw himself in them. Now fast forward. Vecna is in his unformed dimension. He's exploring. And what does he shape the particles of this realm into? A colossal, spider-like entity. The Mind Flayer. The kids in Hawkins gave it that name based on a D&D monster, but its form is not a coincidence. It is a direct manifestation of Vecna's own childhood psychology. He didn't discover the Mind Flayer, he created it. It's a psychic projection, a tool, an extension of his own will sculpted from the dust or particles of the Upside Down and given a shape that was meaningful to him. This is why the Mind Flayer is so focused on possessing and controlling people, on creating a hive mind. It's the ultimate expression of Vecna's desire for control, his belief that humanity is a virus that needs a firm, controlling hand to guide it. The Mind Flayer isn't a separate entity or a bigger boss. It's Vecna's magnum opus, his ultimate weapon, built from his own twisted ideology. Then there's the auditory clue that has haunted the series from the beginning, the grandfather clock. The clock is Vecna's signature, the harbinger of his curse, but its chime, its presence, seems to echo throughout the Upside Down itself. This suggests that his psychic influence is not just targeted, it's ambient, it's baked into the atmosphere of the dimension he rules. The clock is a constant reminder of his power and his origins, a sound that he has imprinted onto the very reality of his creation. Why would an ancient dimension adopt the sound of a specific clock from a specific house in Hawkins? It wouldn't. But a dimension created and molded by the boy who lived in that house absolutely would. The clock is his brand. Furthermore, think about the evolution of the creatures. The Demogorgon in Season 1 was a relatively simple predator. It seemed to be hunting, but its actions were somewhat crude. It was drawn to blood, it could move between worlds, but it didn't display the complex strategic thinking we see later. Then come the Demodogs, which operate in a pack, clearly controlled by a higher intelligence. Then the Mind Flayer, a being of pure strategy and psychic warfare. This evolution doesn't suggest a natural ecosystem. it suggests an arms race. Vecna, as the creator, is refining his weapons. The Demogorgon was his first soldier, a prototype. The Demodogs were an upgraded infantry. The Mind Flayer was his air force, his psychological operations unit. Each new threat the kids face is a more advanced, more terrifying version of the last, because the artist behind them is perfecting his craft. The Upside Down isn't just a place, it's a project. And it has been evolving in real time as Vecna's power and ambition have grown. This recontextualizes his connection to Will Byers. He didn't just infect Will, he used him as a spy, a way to learn about his enemy's world, the real world. He was studying Hawkins through Will's eyes, gathering intelligence to make his mirror world and his eventual invasion more perfect. So what if it's true? What are the ripple effects if the Upside Down is Vecna's personal snow globe of horrors? The implications are massive, and they change the entire meaning of the story. First, it completely redefines Eleven's role. She is no longer just the hero who opened a door and is trying to close it. She becomes a tragic creator figure, a Dr. Frankenstein to Vecna's monster. By banishing him in 1979, she didn't solve a problem, she created a far bigger one. She gave a sociopathic killer with godlike potential his own private dimension to fester in, a sandbox where he could build an army and plan his revenge, all while she was living in a lab, her memory wiped, oblivious to the monster she had unleashed. Her entire journey becomes one of atonement, not just for opening a gate, but for creating the very king who rules the realm beyond it. Her final confrontation with Vecna isn't just about saving the world, it's about cleaning up her own mess, a mess she made as a terrified, powerful child. The guilt of this would be immense. It puts her on a tragic parallel with Henry himself. He was a powerful child who used his powers to kill. She was a powerful child who, in trying to stop him, may have doomed the world. The story becomes a circular tragedy of two powerful children whose actions have universe-altering consequences. Second, it changes the nature of the enemy. The threat is no longer a faceless cosmic horror from a random evil dimension. It's personal. The entire war is the result of one man's rage. The Upside Down, the Mind Flayer, the Demogorgons, they are all symptoms of Henry Creel's pathology. This makes the villain both more understandable and infinitely more terrifying. He's not just an alien force, he's a twisted piece of humanity that has been allowed to metastasize into a world-ending threat. It means the key to defeating the Upside Down isn't just about finding a bigger weapon or closing a gate. It's about understanding the psychology of its creator. To defeat Vecna's world, they have to defeat Vecna's ideology. They have to break his will, not just his body. Finally, it raises the stakes for the final battle. If the Upside Down is a psychic construct tied directly to Vecna, what happens when he dies? Does the gate just close, or does the entire dimension collapse? If the Upside Down is a projection of his mind, then killing him could be like switching off the projector. The entire dark mirror of Hawkins could simply cease to exist. This could be the only way to truly win, to erase the rot completely. But it's a huge gamble. What if parts of our world are now so intertwined with the Upside Down that its destruction would cause catastrophic damage to our own reality? What if killing Vecna unravels the fabric of space-time in Hawkins? It transforms the ending from a simple battle of good versus evil into a complex, high-stakes question of metaphysical science. They aren't just fighting a monster, they're trying to safely decommission a supernatural nuclear reactor that is hardwired to its creator's brain. The entire narrative shifts from a story about a town fighting a monster to a story about a girl confronting the living embodiment of her own past, a monster she inadvertently crowned, king of a realm she inadvertently built. But let's pivot for a moment. Let's look at another character, one who has been at the absolute center of the storm since day one. What if Will Byers' connection to the Upside Down isn't just a scar? What if it's a seed? The theory that Will Byers has powers, or worse, is destined to become the story's final, tragic villain has been simmering for years. It's a dark, heartbreaking possibility that reframes Will from a victim into a ticking time bomb. He's not just the boy who was rescued, he's the boy who brought a piece of the shadow back with him, a piece that is growing inside him, waiting for its moment. The evidence isn't just in his true sight or his goosebumps, it's in his art, his personality, and his deep thematic connection to the lore of Dungeons and Dragons. This isn't just a what-if, it's a potential endgame that would elevate Stranger Things from a story of friendship prevailing over evil to a Greek tragedy about one of their own becoming the very thing they've fought so hard to destroy. Let's start with the most obvious evidence. Will's true sight. Ever since his return from the Upside Down, Will has been the party's canary in the coal mine. He gets goosebumps on the back of his neck when the Mind Flayer is near. He can feel its presence, its emotions, its intent. In Season 2, this was framed as a kind of PTSD, a lingering connection from his possession, but as time has gone on, it started to look less like a wound and more like a dormant ability. He's not just sensing the monster, he's connected to it on a fundamental psychic level. Think about it. No one else who has had a close encounter with the Upside Down has this ability. Nancy was dragged in. Steve fought Demobats. Hopper spent time in a Russian prison with a Demogorgon. None of them have a supernatural spidey sense. Only Will. Why? The Mind Flayer didn't just possess him, it tried to merge with him. It filled him with its essence, the particles of the Upside Down, and used him as a host. While Joyce and the others managed to exorcise the entity by overheating Will's body, what if they didn't get all of it? What if a piece of it, a seed of its power, remained dormant in his system, integrated into his DNA? This wouldn't be a simple infection, it would be a transformation. This latent power explains why he can still feel Vecna in Season 4. Vecna is the general, and the Mind Flayer is his army. The piece of that army still inside Will is like a radio receiver picking up the general's commands. But what if it's more than that? What if that receiver could one day become a transmitter? The Duffer Brothers have repeatedly called Season 5 the Will Byers season. They've stated that his journey is the core of the final chapter. This heavily implies his role is about to become much more active. He's not going to be the damsel in distress again. He's going to be a major player. And his connection to Vecna is the key. The painting he made for Mike is another huge piece of evidence. On the surface, it's a sweet, heartbreaking gesture of friendship. But look at the subtext. He paints Mike as a knight leading the party against a dragon. He tells Mike that he is the heart of the group, the one who holds them all together. But this is a fantasy, a story Will is telling Mike to make him feel better and to hide his own feelings. The chilling part is that Will has a history of his art, his creations, bleeding into reality. In Season 1, he throws a fireball in their D&D campaign to defeat the Demogorgon. Later, Jonathan and Nancy use fire to defeat the real thing. In Season 2, he draws the sprawling tunnels of the Mind Flayer under Hawkins, creating a map for Hopper. His art is prophetic. So what is his Season 4 painting prophesying? It depicts a battle. But what if the real prophecy is in the act of creation itself? Will is creating a narrative. He is trying to hold the party together with a story. This hints at a power to shape reality, or at least to perceive and influence it through his own will and creativity. What if this artistic, world-building impulse is the very thing the Mind Flayer, Vecna, needs in a host? Not just a body, but a creative mind to help it imagine new horrors. Will isn't just a victim, he's the perfect vessel. The corroborating evidence for Will's dark destiny is more subtle, but it's everywhere. It's in the quiet moments, the visual cues, and the foundational lore of the show. Let's go back to the very beginning, to the Dungeons & Dragons campaign in Season 1. The party is fighting the Demogorgon. Mike, the Dungeon Master, says, "Will's action." What does Will do? He casts a fireball. It fails. The Demogorgon gets him. This is a direct parallel to what happens in the real world just hours later. But there's another famous D&D villain, a character who perfectly mirrors Will's potential arc. Vecna. In the game's lore, Vecna was a powerful wizard who became a lich, an undead sorcerer. But before he was a lich, he was a mortal. What if Will Byers is destined to become the show's version of Vecna? Not the Henry Creel version, but a new one, or a vessel for the original. The name is not a coincidence. The kids named the real villain Vecna because his curse resembled the game character's abilities, but what if the true Vecna of their party has been there all along? This would be the ultimate tragic irony. They've been fighting a monster named Vecna, all while their friend is slowly turning into him. There's also the visual language used with Will. Throughout the seasons, he is often framed as isolated, out of sync with the other kids. While they are discovering girls and new hobbies, Will is still clutching his D&D manuals, trying to hold on to the childhood that was stolen from him. This isolation makes him vulnerable, but it also sets him apart. In Season 3, during the argument with Mike in the rain, Will destroys Castle Byers, his childhood sanctuary. It's a moment of rage and grief, but it's also a symbolic death of his innocence. He is shedding his old self. What is he becoming? The show often uses lighting and color to connect Will to the Upside Down. In many scenes, he is cast in cold blue light, the same palette used for the dark dimension. It's a constant visual reminder that a part of that world is still a part of him. Then there's the conversation he has with Mike in the van in Season 4. While he's using the painting to talk about 11, he's really talking about himself. He says, "When you're different, sometimes you feel like a mistake." This is the core of Will's emotional trauma, but it's also the exact same sentiment that drove Henry Creel. Henry felt different, isolated, and misunderstood. He saw humanity as a plague and wanted to reshape it. What if Will's trauma, his feeling of being a mistake, pushes him down a similar path? Not out of malice, but out of a twisted desire to protect the people he loves by controlling the world that hurts them. Vecna preys on trauma. And Will Byers is arguably the most traumatized character in the entire show. He's the perfect target for Vecna's final play, to find a successor. The implications of this theory are absolutely devastating. If Will Byers becomes the final villain, it shatters the core theme of the show. Stranger Things has always been about the power of friendship and love to conquer the darkness. But what happens when the darkness is wearing the face of your best friend? It would force the party to make an impossible choice: kill one of their own to save the world, or risk everything to try and save him. This would be a conflict that couldn't be solved with a bigger bomb or a psychic showdown. It would be an emotional war. Mike, in particular, would be at the center of this tragedy. His entire arc has been about leadership and rallying his friends. How could he lead a fight against Will? The guilt he already feels for neglecting Will would be amplified 1,000 times. It would test the bonds of the party in a way that no monster ever could. The final battle wouldn't be against a grotesque creature from another dimension. It would be for the soul of Will Byers. It also offers a chilling explanation for why the Upside Down is frozen in 1983. We've been discussing the theory that Vecna shaped it on that day, but what if there's another layer to it? What if the dimension is not just tied to Vecna's power, but to Will's consciousness? The day he was taken was the last day his world was normal. What if his own subconscious, infected by the mind flayer, is the force that is keeping the Upside Down in that state of temporal stasis? It's a prison, but it's also a monument to his stolen childhood. If this is true, then freeing Will might not be enough. His connection to that world might be permanent. He might be the anchor that keeps the Upside Down tethered to Hawkins. This would mean that to truly sever the connection, Will might have to sacrifice himself, or in a darker turn, he might choose to embrace his power. Imagine a scenario where Vecna is defeated, but the seed of his power inside Will blossoms. Will, tired of being a victim, tired of feeling like a mistake, decides to take control of the Upside Down himself. He could see it as a way to protect his friends, to create a buffer zone between Hawkins and any future threats. He could become a benevolent king of a dead world, a lonely god in a realm of shadow. But power corrupts. How long could he remain the good guy when he wields the power of the mind flayer? It's a heartbreaking, epic conclusion that would make Will Byers one of the most tragic figures in modern television, a hero who became a monster in the process of trying to heal. Let's push the boundaries even further. Boundaries. We've explored what-ifs about the nature of the Upside Down and its inhabitants, but what if we've been asking the wrong questions about the dimension itself? What if the Upside Down isn't a parallel dimension at all? What if it's not a mirror but a premonition? The theory that the Upside Down is actually Hawkins in a distant, apocalyptic future is a mind-bending concept that transforms the story from a supernatural horror into a dark science fiction tragedy. In this version of events, the conflict isn't about closing a gate between two coexisting places. It's about preventing a horrifying, predestined future from coming to pass. The kids aren't fighting an invasion from another world, they're fighting a war against time itself. The core evidence for this theory lies in the physical state of the Upside Down. Yes, it's frozen on the day Will disappeared, but look closer at its condition. It's not just a dark copy, it's a world in a state of advanced decay. The buildings are covered in strange growths and vines, but they are also crumbling, as if they have been abandoned for decades, or even centuries. The air is filled with floating spores, which some have speculated could be the result of some kind of nuclear or biological event. When Hopper and Joyce go into the Upside Down in Season 1, Hopper has a flashback to his daughter's death, suggesting the atmosphere itself triggers memories of loss and decay. This is more than just spooky set dressing. It's a world that has died. The question is when? If the Upside Down is the future, then the gate isn't a portal through space, but a wormhole through time. Vecna's final plan, the one we see taking shape at the end of Season 4 with the giant gates cracking open across Hawkins, isn't just about letting monsters in. It's the cataclysm. It's the event that creates the future we see in the Upside Down. He's not opening a door to his world, he's fast-forwarding Hawkins to its own funeral. This theory elegantly explains the floating spores and the toxic atmosphere. It could be the long-term fallout from the gates tearing reality apart. The merging of the dimensions is a slow, cancerous process that eventually kills the town, leaving behind only the desiccated, spore-filled husk that the characters have been visiting all along. The creatures, like the Demogorgon, could be the result of this temporal, dimensional apocalypse. Perhaps they were once normal creatures from our world, animals or even people that were horribly mutated by the energy of the rift over hundreds of years. They aren't invaders, they are the grotesque descendants of our own world, now being sent back in time by Vecna to ensure their own creation. It's a terrifying causal loop, a paradox where the future is actively attacking the past to guarantee its own existence. Vecna, a being who can seemingly transcend time and space, would be the only one capable of orchestrating such a complex, temporal war. He isn't just a general, he's a time traveler. His curse, where he shows his victims visions of their past traumas, is a form of mental time travel. Why couldn't he do the same on a physical dimensional scale? The corroborating clues are fascinating when viewed through this temporal lens. Think about the nature of the Upside Down's connection to Hawkins. It perfectly mirrors the town's geography. Every street, every building, every tree is in the exact same place. This makes perfect sense if it's not a parallel world, but the same world at a different point in time. The reason the buyer's house is there is because it is the buyer's house just centuries in the future, rotted and corrupted. The electricity is another clue. The kids learn they can communicate through lights, which flicker between the two times. This could be a temporal echo, a lingering connection where the energy of the past can still briefly manifest in the dead future, and vice versa. It's not two places communicating, it's two moments in the same timeline, linked by a scar. The red lightning that constantly storms in the sky of the Upside Down could be a perpetual atmospheric effect of the original cataclysm, a wound in the sky that never heals. Then there's Vecna's ultimate goal. He tells Eleven he wants to reshape the world. He shows Nancy a vision of the future, clouds of red smoke, monstrous creatures, a giant monster, and a dead Hawkins. He's not just showing her a vision of what he wants to do, he's showing her the future that he is from, or at least the future that he is trying to create and make permanent. He is the architect of this apocalypse, and he is using the portal to his future timeline as his primary weapon, pulling its horrors back into the present. This also adds another layer to why the dimension is frozen on November the 6th, 1983. In the Vecna created it theory, that's the day he got the psychic blueprint. In the future theory, that date still holds significance. It was the date of the first major breach. In the history of the future apocalyptic Hawkins, that was day zero. That was the moment the timeline was irrevocably broken. So when someone from the past, like Will, is pulled into that future, the future world's present is still defined by that original sin. The future is haunted by its own past. The temporal mechanics are confusing, but the thematic weight is immense. It suggests that the future isn't written, but it's fighting back, trying to make itself inevitable. If this theory is true, the implications are profound. It changes the entire genre of the show and reframes the stakes completely. The fight is no longer about stopping an invasion, it's about preventing a prophecy. It becomes a story about fate, destiny, and the possibility of changing the future. Can the characters break the loop, or are all of their actions just leading them down the path to the very apocalypse they are trying to stop? This would make every victory feel bittersweet, and every loss feel like a step closer to the inevitable. It also makes Vecna an even more formidable villain. He's not just powerful, he has the ultimate strategic advantage. He's seen the future because he's trying to build it. He knows how he wins. He's not just predicting their moves, he's remembering them. The kids are playing checkers, and he's playing chess across time. How do you defeat an enemy who has already seen the end of the game? This raises the terrifying possibility that the only way to win is to do something so unpredictable, so outside the established timeline, that it completely shatters the loop. This could point towards a massive sacrifice, someone removing themselves from the equation entirely to create a future that Vecna could never have anticipated. It could also mean that the solution isn't closing the gate, but somehow healing the timeline itself. This might require a different kind of power, perhaps something related to Eleven's own abilities to move through space and memory. Could she learn to move through time? Could the final confrontation take place not in Hawkins in 1986, but at a key moment in the past or the future? The story could end up involving a time heist of sorts, an attempt to undo the damage at its source. Finally, it makes the story deeply tragic. The shadowy, terrifying world of the Upside Down is not some alien other. It's us. It's our world after we've lost. Every time the characters venture into that dark place, they are walking through the graveyard of their own hopes. They are seeing what happens if they fail. The psychological weight of that knowledge would be crushing. It's one thing to fight a monster. It's another thing entirely to fight a future that is already dead. The fight for Hawkins becomes a fight for the very concept of hope in a world that seems destined for ruin. Now let's zoom in from the cosmic and the temporal to the deeply personal. Let's talk about a hero, a fallen hero. What if death isn't the end in the world of Stranger Things? We saw it with Hopper, and we might see it again. The theory that Eddie Munson will return, not as himself, but as Cass the Bloody-Handed, Vecna's vampire lieutenant from D&D lore, is more than just wishful thinking. It's a theory rooted in deep narrative parallels, visual foreshadowing, and the established rules of the Stranger Things universe. Eddie's death was heroic, but it also felt incomplete. His story was about being an outcast, a freak, who finally found his moment to be a hero. But what if his heroism was just the first chapter of a much darker, much more epic story? What if, to truly defeat Vecna, the party needs a monster of their own? Let's dive into the evidence, starting with the Dungeons & Dragons lore, which has always been the show's prophetic blueprint. In D&D, Cass is Vecna's most trusted lieutenant. He is a human-turned-vampire, a powerful warrior who wields a shield and a sword. For a long time, he serves Vecna faithfully, but eventually his own ambition and the corrupting influence of his sentient sword cause him to betray his master. In the lore, it is Cass who ultimately defeats Vecna, cutting off his hand and his eye. Now let's look at Eddie Munson's death scene. He dies in the Upside Down, bitten to death by demobats. He's not shot, he's not crushed. He is specifically killed by creatures of the Upside Down, creatures controlled by Vecna. This is key. The nature of his death matters. The bats don't just kill him, they infuse him with the energy, the particles of the Upside Down. We've already theorized that this is how Will Byers got his lingering connection. So what if the massive dose Eddie received didn't just kill him, but changed him? Left his body ripe for resurrection, but as something else, something not quite human. The parallels to Cass are startling. Eddie's weapon of choice in the final battle? A makeshift spear and a shield with a demon painted on it. Cass is famous for his shield. Eddie's tattoos include a swarm of bats and a puppet master, a clear nod to Vecna's control. He is literally marked by the very things that define his D&D counterpart. Even his concert in the Upside Down, playing Metallica's Master of Puppets, is a perfect thematic fit. He is literally playing the theme song of his own master-to-be. But the Duffer Brothers took it a step further. They armed him with a guitar that looked like a weapon, and his final stand was a sacrifice to buy his friends more time. It was the ultimate bard's song, a final act of inspiration and heroism. But what if that wasn't the end of his song? What if it was just the prelude? Dustin's final speech to Eddie's uncle is heartbreaking, but it contains a crucial line. He says Eddie didn't run. He fought and died to protect Hawkins. He died a hero. But the rest of Hawkins thinks he was a satanic cult leader responsible for the murders. His name is not cleared. His story is unfinished. Bringing him back as Cass would provide the ultimate narrative redemption. He would have to fight his way back from being a monster, both literally and figuratively, to prove the hero he truly is. His return wouldn't cheapen his sacrifice, it would complicate it in the most interesting way possible. He sacrificed his humanity and now he has to live with the consequences. The corroborating evidence for Eddie's vampiric return is hidden in the details of Season 4 and the established rules of the universe. First, the bats. In classic vampire lore, bats are deeply connected to vampires. They are their spies, their familiars, their alternate forms. The fact that Eddie is killed by bats is almost too perfect to be a coincidence. It's a classic trope, remixed for the Stranger Things universe. Could the Demobat bites have a transformative vampiric effect? It's a world with psychic powers and alternate dimensions. A form of supernatural vampirism is not a huge leap. Second, let's consider where he died. He died in the Upside Down. His body is still there. We saw what the Upside Down's environment did to Barb's body, but Eddie's death was different. It wasn't just a simple death, it was an infusion of the dimension's energy. What if Vecna, upon returning to the Upside Down, finds Eddie's body? He's weakened, he's just lost a major battle. He needs new lieutenants. He needs to rebuild his army. What better raw material than a recently deceased, strong-willed human, already primed with upside-down energy? He could resurrect Eddie just as he controls the other creatures of that world. He could make Eddie his new general, his K's. He would see the poetic justice in taking the freak who tried to defy him and turning him into his ultimate puppet. The visual foreshadowing is there too. Eddie's long hair, his dark clothing, his intense energy. He already has the rock and roll vampire aesthetic down. His Hellfire Club is a direct reference to a famous X-Men villain group, hinting at his comfort with being an outsider and a villain. His final words to Dustin, "I love you, man," are a beautiful moment of closure. But what if that love is the very thing that allows him to eventually break free from Vecna's control? In the D&D lore, it was Cass's own ambition that led him to betray Vecna. In the Stranger Things version, it would be his love for his friends, his loyalty to Dustin. That would be the chink in Vecna's armor. He could create a monster, but he couldn't erase the heart of the hero inside. This creates a perfect internal conflict for a resurrected Eddie, the monster he was made into versus the man he was. So, what are the implications of Eddie Munson returning as Cass? They are spectacular. First and foremost, it introduces a powerful new player onto the board for the final season. The party is currently outgunned. Max is in a coma, 11 is still recovering her full strength, and Vecna is more powerful than ever. They need an edge. What better edge than a superpowered, undead, metalhead ally who has an inside connection to the main villain? Eddie as Cass would be a powerhouse. He would have the strength and abilities of the Upside Down, but hopefully the will of Eddie Munson. He could be their ultimate secret weapon. Second, it creates an incredible character arc. Eddie would return as a creature of nightmare. He would likely be under Vecna's control at first, forcing the party to fight their resurrected friend. This would be an emotionally devastating conflict, especially for Dustin. It would be a battle to break Vecna's hold and bring the real Eddie back to the surface. His journey would be about reclaiming his identity and learning to control his new, monstrous powers for good. It's a classic Taming the Beast Within storyline, and it would be a phenomenal showcase for the character. The ultimate culmination of this arc would be the fated betrayal. The party's final plan to defeat Vecna might hinge on one thing: getting their inside man, Kaz, close enough to the Master to strike the final blow. Eddie's destiny wouldn't have been to die for Hawkins, but to be reborn for it. His sacrifice wasn't the end, It was the price of admission to the real final battle. It would be the ultimate D&D prophecy come to life. The party's chaotic good bard, rogue, becomes a vampire fighter, the only one who can get close enough to the Lich King to end his reign. It would be a beautiful, poetic, and incredibly metal conclusion to his story. Finally, it would fulfill the promise of his character. Eddie was always an outcast, judged by the world for how he looked and what he loved. Returning as a literal monster, a vampire only to become the world's savior, is the ultimate vindication. He would prove that it's not what you are on the outside that matters, but who you choose to be. He would have to embrace the freak and monster labels and turn them into a source of strength. It would be a powerful message of acceptance, one that has been at the heart of the Hellfire Club's ethos all along. Eddie Munson, the king of the freaks, would become the savior of them all. Now let's pull back the camera. We've explored 4 distinct, sprawling what-ifs. A dimension created by a boy's rage. A quiet kid destined to become a dark god. A shadow world that is actually our own dead future. And a fallen hero reborn as a monster to save the day. On the surface, these theories might seem contradictory. The Upside Down can't be both Vecna's creation and the future, can it? Eddie's return as Kaz seems to rely on Vecna's power, but what does that mean if Will is the true final boss? But what if these theories aren't mutually exclusive? What if they are all pieces of a much larger, more terrifying puzzle? Let's spend some time synthesizing these ideas, connecting the dots on our paranormal detective board, and see what kind of horrifying unified theory emerges. Let's start by weaving together the 2 biggest cosmological theories, that Vecna created the Upside Down and that the Upside Down is the future. How can both be true? It seems like a paradox. One theory posits the dimension was shaped in 1983, a perfect snapshot of the past. The other suggests it's a vision of a far future apocalypse. But what if Vecna is a far more sophisticated artist of destruction than we imagine? Let's consider his powers. He is a psychic of immense ability, capable of creating intricate mental landscapes and projecting them into the minds of his victims. He can also, as he tells Eleven, transcend space and time. So what if when Eleven banished him in 1979, he wasn't just sent to a random chaotic dimension? What if he was cast out of the normal flow of time? Perhaps he was pushed into a pocket reality where he could perceive the entire timeline of Hawkins, past, present, and future. In this state, he saw the apocalypse he was destined to create. He saw the future ruin of the town, the world choked by rifts and crawling with monsters. This vision of a dead future became his inspiration. Then on November 6, 1983, when Eleven opened the first gate, he didn't just get a psychic blueprint of Hawkins as it was in that moment. He used that connection to start building his masterpiece. He began to mold the raw, chaotic dimension he was in, using 2 things as his guide: his memory of the world he hated and his vision of the future he wanted to create. The Upside Down, therefore, is a hybrid reality. It has the architecture of Hawkins from 1983, the snapshot that Nancy discovered. This is the foundation. But it has the atmosphere and decay of the apocalyptic future. Vecna is essentially building a scale model of the apocalypse, using the past as his canvas. This explains everything. It explains why the buildings are there, perfectly matching the 1983 layout, but also why they are crumbling and covered in spores. It's a future state of decay being retroactively applied to a past framework. The spores, the red lightning, the toxic air, that's the future bleeding through. The frozen-in-time objects and diaries, that's the anchor to the past. Vecna isn't just a creator or a time traveler, he's a temporal artist. He is pulling elements from the end of time and painting them onto a canvas from 1983. This makes him infinitely more dangerous. He's not just trying to recreate a future he saw, he's actively building it in a pocket dimension, perfecting it, and getting it ready for its grand unveiling in our world. The Upside Down is his dress rehearsal for the end of the world. Now let's weave in the character-centric theories. How do evil Will and Kaz Eddie fit into this terrifying hybrid reality? They become the central figures in the final act of this temporal war. Let's start with Will. If the Upside Down is a fusion of past and future, Will's connection to it becomes even more profound. He wasn't just taken to a parallel world, he was essentially kidnapped and thrown into a living prophecy of doom. The piece of the mind flayer that remains inside him isn't just a connection to Vecna, it's a connection to the apocalypse itself. He is carrying a seed of the dead future inside his own body. This elevates the Will as the final villain theory. He's not just a potential host for Vecna, he could become the living anchor that fuses the future and the present together permanently. Vecna's plan might not be just to open gates, but to use Will as the final key. If he can fully corrupt Will, turning him into a willing vessel, Will's own latent psychic and creative abilities could become the engine that pulls the entirety of the dead future into the present, making the apocalypse instant and irreversible. Will would become the patient zero of the end of the world. This sets the stage for an incredible emotional and metaphysical conflict. The party wouldn't just be fighting to save Will's soul, they'd be fighting to stop him from becoming a walking, talking time paradox that could unravel reality. Now where does Kaz Eddie fit in? He becomes the ultimate countermove. He is the unforeseen consequence, the wrench in Vecna's perfect temporal machine. Vecna's plan is meticulous, spanning decades, even centuries. He's accounted for 11 for the party, for everything, but he's arrogant. He might resurrect Eddie to be his mindless servant, his vampire lieutenant, a trophy of his victory over the Hellfire Club. He would see it as a perfect, ironic punishment. But he would underestimate the one thing his grand cosmic plan can't account for: human loyalty. Eddie's love for his friends, particularly Dustin, would be the flaw in the code. This love would be the catalyst that allows him to break free from Vecna's control. And once he's free, what is he? He's a being of the Upside Down, a creature of the dead future. He has all the power of the enemy, but the heart of a hero. This makes him the only person who can truly fight on Vecna's level. 11's power is from the void, a different kind of energy, but Eddie's power would be from the Upside Down itself. He would be able to navigate it, understand it, and fight within it in a way no one else can. This creates a beautiful symmetry. The final war would be fought between two potential successors to Vecna's power. On one side you have Will Byers, the tragic victim, tempted by the power to end his own pain by ending everything. He represents the despair of the future. On the other side you have Eddie Munson, the resurrected outcast, fighting to reclaim his humanity. He represents the hope that even in death, even when turned into a monster, you can still choose to be a hero. The final battle for Hawkins becomes a three-way struggle. Vecna, the architect of doom, Will, the potential vessel of the apocalypse, and Kaz Eddie, the monster who chose to fight for the past. It's a war not just for a town, but for the soul of the future itself. So we are left with a grand, terrifying tapestry. The story begins with a boy, Henry Creel, who feels so alien in his own world that he decides to burn it all down. He is cast out by a powerful girl into a formless void, a place outside of time. There, he sees the future, a beautiful, silent apocalypse. This becomes his obsession. He gets his chance in 1983 using the girl's psychic echo to begin building his masterpiece, a dimension with the bones of the past and the flesh of the dead future. To realize this future, he needs a key, a human anchor. He finds one in a sensitive, creative boy named Will Byers, whom he infects with the seed of this temporal decay. For years, he wages a proxy war, testing his creations, refining his methods, and slowly corrupting the boy who holds the key. He is a patient god, building his kingdom in the shadows. But in his arrogance, he creates the instruments of his own potential downfall. He pushes a group of kids too far, forging them into heroes, and in a moment of hubris, he kills a brave, loud-mouthed metalhead, leaving his body to rot in his dimension, not realizing that he has just created the perfect raw material for a traitor. He resurrects this boy, Eddie Munson, to be his vampire slave, his Kaz, blind to the fact that the boy's loyalty to his friends is a force more powerful than any psychic control. As the final battle begins, the gates between the present and the future apocalypse are tearing open. Vecna is close to his goal of merging the timelines, using the corrupted Will Byers as his final living catalyst. But the party has one last desperate play. They have a monster of their own. The final confrontation is not just 11 versus Vecna. It is a war on multiple fronts. It is a fight for Will's soul, a battle to pull him back from the brink of becoming the god of a dead world. And it is Eddie's moment of destiny, the vampire lieutenant, the ultimate outcast, turning on his master at the crucial moment, just as the D&D lore foretold. It's a story of paradoxes and prophecies, of heroes and monsters, and the thin, blurry line that separates them. This journey through the shadows of what could be shows us that the story of Stranger Things is far richer and more complex than it appears. It's a web of interconnected possibilities where the nature of a dimension, the fate of a hero, and the soul of a victim are all hanging in the balance. From a world born of rage to a future written in ash and spore, from a fallen hero given a second, monstrous life to a quiet boy who holds the power to unravel reality, the theories don't just offer fun speculation. They point towards a deeper, more tragic, and ultimately more epic conclusion. But as we stand on the edge of the final season, looking into the red, stormy skies of a world on the brink of annihilation, the most important what-if still remains. When the dust finally settles and the last monster falls, who will be left standing? And what if the price of saving the world is becoming something that is no longer human at all?